Hello, in this broadcast, the program time with an overview of the main events of the day. In Russia, the Day of the Defender of the Homeland is being celebrated, but the 23rd of February is celebrated evidently in all republics of the former Soviet Union. For the veterans of the splintered country, it has acquired a special significance, a special meaning. We congratulate all the men who consider today to be their day of celebration. It's symbolic that from the borders of Tajikistan, the relay of victory began its course today. In the framework of functions dedicated to the 50th anniversary of the Great Victory, a capsule with a mound of earth from the 12th border post of sad renown, accompanied by border escorts, set out along the Tajik stretch of the national border. The motorcade relay will in sequence be continued by Uzbeki, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenian border troops. The escort will pass along the entire southern border of the former Soviet Union, and the 9th of May will end up in the city Brest, where the most terrible war began. The meaning of the action is to bury the war as a phenomenon where it took its inception. And again, our correspondent from Tajikistan has made contact with the station. Some commemorated the soldiers who died there during the Great Patriotic War. Others were shooting at the Russian military servicemen today. The celebration of the day honoring the defenders of the homeland was darkened in Tajikistan by one more terrorist act. At 7:30 local time in Dushanbe, from the yard of a residential home, a grenade launcher was used to shoot at a bus belonging to the military hospital of Russian border troops in Tajikistan, containing basically medical workers. As a result of the explosion, 7 people, 6 of whom were women, received injuries of varying degrees of severity. Having lost both legs, the senior nurse, the ensign Nina Lee, soon died. 2 more women are in critical condition. The qualifications of military doctors give us basis to hope that the injured will survive. On the site of the incident, an instrument for shooting was found, and witnesses as well who gave a physical description of the criminal. The area of the incident is cordoned off and being combed through by militia and the security ministry staff. And now again, about what unites everyone who celebrates the 23rd of February, no matter where they may live, the 23rd of February, 50 years ago. The 23rd of February, 1945, after a month of ambush, our forces celebrated their victory again. And on that day, on all fronts, the order of the Commander-in-Chief was read aloud on the 27th anniversary of the Red Army. In it, it said, "The Red Army and Red Fleet comrades, officers and generals, complete victory over the Germans is already in sight. The doomed adversary is making every last effort in war, resorting to the most extreme and base methods of fighting. The closer our victory, the stronger our blows on the enemy should be." On this day, Churchill wrote to Stalin, "The Red Army is celebrating its 27th anniversary with triumph, which evoked the boundless admiration of its allies and which has determined the demise of German militarism. Future generations will recognize their indebtedness to the Red Army just as unconditionally as we do, who have lived to witness these magnificent victories." Those who lived during those days remember well with what admiration we viewed our army, how proud we were of its feats and victories. Much, very much has changed since then. The army itself has changed, its name, its traditions, its uniform. But the main thing remains, that which had sustained it 50 and 100 and 200 years ago. Time and political conjecture notwithstanding, the Russian soldier remains, not given to whims, resourceful, and with unbelievable endurance. How often, in the times most difficult for the country, everyone remembered him spontaneously, knowing that he would last through everything and endure everything. And he tolerated cold, hunger, thirst, and bitter weather, the shame of prison and the bitterness of defeat. But even in the most horrible tribulations, for the most part he remained a human being, kind and selfless, forgiving and broad-hearted. 50 years ago, our soldier, bracing himself, extracted peace out of the furnace of the most terrible war. And then, and now, he had one right, which made him different from all the rest of the people. The right to be first to die for his homeland, no matter what the homeland was like. Today we learned something that was unknown about the Great World War. Archive documents, which until now were classified, appeared at the exhibit. The Tretyakov Gallery, one of its buildings, the engineering corps, today was the center of attention of all the diplomatic and journalistic staff of the capital of Russia. There were two reasons. Today the opening of the international exhibit occurred. Documents of the Great War, which everyone had anticipated, because rumors had leaked to the press that for the first time the original of the secret protocol to the Soviet-German agreement on non-aggression dated the 23rd of August 1939 would be displayed, which everyone had considered to be lost, and it was not found by any commission, which were in abundance in our country and in the West. Also, President Boris Yeltsin was to visit the exhibit. But if the first sensation did come to pass, the second event didn't occur. Boris Yeltsin did not arrive at the exhibit, although he was expected and all required preparations were made. The president was detained, as an informed source told us, by an urgent telephone call, either from abroad or from Chechnya. The exhibits of the display speak of preparations and the beginning of the greatest tragedy of mankind in the 20th century, World War II. The exhibit includes 400 items, documents, maps, newspapers, flyers, banners, photo and phono documents, and consists of 14 thematic categories. In this exhibit, presented to the public for the first time, are almost all the materials produced during that period, and from 1937 to 1967 previously had been closed. In the West and in our country, much was said that these documents don't exist at all. That is, they're originals. Only copies had been shown until this date, and copies are not given much credence. Hence, several unpredictable turns in international politics in Europe and the world. And now a sensation. The originals of these documents were displayed for public viewing in Moscow. Behind the background, the empirical policies of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And evidently that's why for a long time they lied and concealed the truth. The President of Russia, he is the Commander-in-Chief, the head and the members of government, the Chairman of the Federative Council, Speaker of Parliament, national deputies, laid wreaths to the tomb of the unknown soldier at the Kremlin wall. The current celebration, which occurs in days during the time when on Russian territory combat is underway, attacks on the Russian army by the press continue, and the prestige of the armed forces has fallen, affects the nature of the triumphant ceremonies. No, the honorary guard looks just as valorous. Nothing has changed in the military salute either. If the Day of the Homeland Defenders would affect the entire male population of the country, basically congratulations were given to those who fought in the Great Patriotic War. Now the situation has changed. Veterans are not forgotten. Current congratulations were made to the Russian soldiers who are in Chechnya. We wish them to endure and withstand, that they should survive, that they should return to their homes, and that they shouldn't be despondent because the people are for this type of resolution. The people are for them, and no matter what is written about the army, no, in truth, our armed forces, our soldiers and officers don't shoot at the backs of elderly men and women, and don't use them as a live shield. They fight with honor. That's the most important thing. The veterans of the Great Patriotic War who defended our country from fascism with honor fulfilled their duty to the homeland. And even if in 1945 the country had another name, there were always defenders for our homeland, and they are today simply carrying out their duty. For this, we bow low before them. Near the Kremlin wall, it was triumphant, but almost 20 parties and movements of the opposition held a rally in the capital and demonstration. Pushkin Square in Moscow for a long time has been a favorite spot for demonstrations of the most diverse leanings of thoughts. And today, near the base of the monument to the great poet, representatives of many parties and movements gathered, their formal reason to celebrate the 23rd of February. In fact, another demonstration condemning the current social order in Russia. The intenseness of slogans and banners was startling, and in general a most diverse gathering of demonstrators. The communists set the tone, from Labor Russia and representatives of the Union of Officers of Terekov. To speak about the precise number of demonstrators is difficult. Judge for yourselves. This is a film of a column of demonstrators moving along Tverskaya toward Theatrical Square. The march ended with a rally of the oppositioners near the monument of another prominent figure of world history. The Red Army is stronger than everyone. The Union of Entrepreneurs and Industrialists of Russia has decided to finance the newly founded Pan-Russian Soldiers Fraternity. Its aims is a unified armed forces and fleet, a unified military-industrial sector, guaranteed defense sufficiency, unconditional pursuit of and defense of national and geopolitical interests of Russia. The future was discussed by the head commanders of the armed forces today. In 1995, we must conclusively define priorities in military reform. This was stated at a press conference today of the head commanders of the armed forces of Russia. So in the opinion of the commander of the ground forces, Vladimir Semyonov, basic priorities for ground forces are not the development of means of destruction, but to strengthen the structure of command, communications, intelligence, and radio-electronic tools for battle. Considering the new geopolitical realities, the head commander noted that Russia needs not an enormous but a contemporary mobile army capable of engaging in local wars, and therefore he indicated that the Chechen War is not considered to be such a war. Ideally, Russia should have a well-trained professional army. However, in current economic conditions, it's simply unrealistic. At the current level, we need to maintain that principle of staffing as is, that is the mixed principle, by conscription and by contract. In order to progress to having a professional army, evidently, years will be needed. And one more historical date today, and a tragic date. In Ingushetia, as in neighboring Chechnya, today it's a day of national mourning. 51 years ago, the 23rd of February 1944, tens of thousands of Chechens and Ingushetians on Stalin's orders were deported. In memory of the victims of the deportations in mosques, prayers were held. Only consolidation of efforts of the people of restoration of constitutional rights of compatriots will stop the bloodshed in the Northern Caucasus and prevent tragedies similar to that in the future. This statement was made today by the President of Ingushetia, Ruslan Alshev, at the Conference of the Public dedicated to the 51st anniversary of the deportation. Alshev said that at such conferences it's appropriate to speak of the lessons of the past, but conclusions were not made. Among guests at the conference were the leader of the party, the Democratic Choice of Russia, Igor Gaidar. As was said to the correspondent of Viturtas today, the chairman of the Government of National Rebirth of Chechnya, Salambek Khadjiev, despite the most difficult tribulations, the Chechen people have survived, and that's why it's even more shameful that Dudayev is dragging them into a new, even more cruel tragedy. Regarding Dudayev's threats to commit terrorist acts on the 23rd of February, representatives of the law enforcement organs of the capital of Russia said that the terminology, the day of revenge, from Dudayev's lips was of a propaganda nature. Counterintelligence officials, however, did take additional measures. However, according to information agencies, nothing occurred in Moscow. From the Department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia in the Northern Caucasus, they also reported that there were no urgent occurrences recorded there. In Grozny itself, have a look, the population has reached today 150,000 people. That is, the process of the gradual return of residents to the Chechen capital continues. Before the beginning of combat, the city had a population of around 300,000. Yet the situation naturally is quite tense. 3 areas in the capital of Chechnya, Chernarechye, Khalday, and the new industrial region, are subjected to daily massive blows from the air and heavy weapons. For now, these areas are under the control of Jahar Dudayev gunmen. Individual groups of gunmen who penetrated as refugees the weapons which they had left in place, they, in turn, take these weapons and attack the army units and militia units. General Rybakov also stated that recently, during the course of an operation, more than 10 units of combat technology and rapid-fire multi-projectile cannons belonging to Dudayev formations were destroyed. Also, Russian formations have blockaded the city from the southern side. Grozny has found itself cut off from the Ochkoye, Martanovsk, and the Shalinsk areas, from whence until recently gunmen were replenishing their weapons and food supplies. The promised powerful counter-assault promised by Dudayev, planned for today, didn't occur. We didn't even see the banner of the Chechen Republic over the presidential palace. This present Dudayev had promised for the Russian forces on the day of the Defender of the Homeland. Meanwhile, in front of the air terminal building in Grozny, today a monument was unveiled to Russian soldiers. The small evergreens in a square and And a figure of a mourning mother will again and again be reminders to us of those young Russian fellows who died in Chechnya while establishing constitutional order. Boris Yeltsin, by his decree today, instituted a representation of the Chechen Republic under the President of the Russian Federation. This is explained by the fact that it's necessary to supply representation of the Republic among federal organs of state rule, also to facilitate coordination of the functioning of the federal and republican bodies of power. The economy. The rate of the Russian ruble against the American dollar in trading at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange today fell by 23 points compared to trading Wednesday and was at the level of 4,407 rubles. The decision of the Union of Miners to remain in a state of pre-strike readiness and postpone the date of picketing until the 15th of March was supported virtually by almost all miners' organizations, Iturtas reports. The urgent trip of the first Vice Premier, Anatoly Chubats, to the mining regions and the government's promised additional financing for the sector facilitated the possibility of a compromise which evidently suits the cabinet of ministers and the mining leaders as well. Those actions which we had planned for the 1st of March, that they were picketing the government building and an indefinite strike until complete compliance with demands occurs. Today we postponed these actions till the 15th of March because part of our demands and some of our desires have already been fulfilled. Part are in the process of being fulfilled unconditionally. Today we do understand that all the debts which are owed to us by the government, it's impossible to return immediately, and we demand that the government make the debt a priority because there is unfortunately a tendency today in the government to protract payments. And if that's the only impediment today, but everything is proceeding through compromise and we'll find a resolution. Today's meeting of Viktor Chernomyrdin with union leaders possibly will remove as well the threat of a spring action of the workers. The unions intend to find agreement with the government if Moscow hears their requests, specifically regarding resolving the problem of debt, reducing the tax pressure, and state regulation for market processes. The President, Boris Yeltsin, today sent a letter to the Speaker, Ivan Rybkin. In the letter, it states that the President declines the law adopted by the Federative Council and the Duma on increasing the minimum salary level. Meanwhile, the State Duma, as Interfax reports, Friday may raise the question of overruling the presidential veto on increasing the minimum pension. And the government of Russia, as the correspondent of Iturtas understood, submits a type of ultimatum. If the Parliament adopts the government draft budget in the third reading, the government, on its part, will again conduct an indexation of salaries and other social benefits for March the 1st. And what occurred in the Duma a little bit later, at the government meeting, however, today, there was discussion on how to save science. During the years of reform, financing has decreased 5 times, and 30% of all scientists have abandoned the country. Journalists also noticed the fact that possibly working together with the administration of the President on economic reform, there will be more progress. This was also discussed today. At today's Presidium of the Ministerial Council, Viktor Chernomyrdin prefaced it with an announcement that in the end of March, an extended session of government will be held to examine the government program for the years 1995 to 97, and he added, the administration of the President approached the government with a proposal for joint preparation of this document, and I think we will all benefit from this. The work will be headed by, I think, Anatoly Borisovich, you will have to do it. This desire of the President's administration is unexpected and gives basis to presume that within it a parallel government is being formed. And one more observation, the first Vice Premier, Anatoly Chubats, who was delegated the leadership of this combined group, is beginning to play a more noticeable role. Also, the Cabinet of Ministers today examined the state of affairs in the nuclear power sector and overall in science. The results in the nuclear ministry are similar to indicators in other sectors, decline in productivity. However, the overall national repercussion of this decline is far more significant. For the liquidation of polluted zones, the ministry was allocated only 10% of what was promised. Meanwhile, only at the Chelyabinsk-Mayak, radiation exceeds 3 Chernobyls. Docked at the northern seaports, written off submarines are standing with nuclear fuel for the utilization of which there's not enough money. Possibly the repercussions will be understandable. And financial problems affected nuclear stations, which are more profitable than steam heating stations. The Prime Minister, for the first time, supported all the requests of the Nuclear Power Ministry, but as well suggested additional measures to stabilize the working sector. In Russia, there's evidence of signs of the political spring, the emergence of new parties and factions, splintering in factions. But only parties which have registered a half year prior to elections can participate. Hence, one can expect the continuation of the battle for mass media. It seems the deputies seriously and professionally decided to work as parliamentarians. These definitions can be attributed to the new deputy group created, the Duma 96. The group is already organized, which was stated by its founders at a press conference. Today, the deputies feel that with correct and professional influence of the group on executive power, this year there may be an improvement in the standard of living of the people. We're putting aside principal political issues, and we will all undertake legislative work in priority directions together, and we've already defined them. They are individual safety, the economy, social problems which affect each Russian. The new group describes its attitude to the government as constructively critical. The deputies will interact with the president and with federal organs of rule in order to achieve a breakthrough in the economy and also in relations between the center and regions. Now there are 23 deputies in the group, mostly independents. For members of other factions, however, the doors are open, especially since as its basic principles of work, the group considers to be professionalism and the right of succession of parliament members. This defines the name of the group, Duma 96. Next year, it will be 90 years since the first Russian Duma was formed, and elections will be held for the 6th Duma. That is, current parliamentarians have managed to combine the past, the present, and the future in the name of their group. Since 1994, there's a monopolization of power by executive structures. This was asserted at a press conference today by the chairman of the Committee of the Duma on Information Policies, Mikhail Poltoranin. The nomenclature, somewhat overshadowed by events of 1994, is confidently regaining lost ground. In the opinion of Poltoranin, for the full monopolization of power, it needs intellectual property, and foremost, that would be mass media. It has all the rest already. Poltoranin feels that the infringement on the freedom of press is underway in two directions. The first, undermining economic independence. Secondly, creating unconstitutional organs of control endowed with the rights to levy sanctions against sources of mass media. Mikhail Poltoranin named three already existing organizations such as that, the Judicial Chamber, the Federal Service on Radio and Television Broadcasting, and the Roscom Press. He emphasized that the existence and increase in the number of private television radio stations does not contradict the principle embedded in Russian laws that broadcasting air is always and will always be a common national possession. Incidentally, it is such a position that exists in all civilized countries. Mikhail Poltoranin also stated that the State Duma currently is directly involved in the fate of Channel 1 Ostankino. Answering the question of the correspondent about its future, Mikhail Poltoranin said, "This is a very painful issue which you have touched on." And we were incidentally instructed, two committees in the State Duma at the session, that is our Committee on Information Policy and the Committee on Property and Privatizations, were instructed to analyze the situation concerning Ostankino and also concerning the joint stock company Ostankino, and to give a legislative basis or draft law in this regard. The complexity is in the fact that Ostankino today, as a television radio company, seems to exist and yet does not exist. The channel was transferred to the joint stock company Ostankino. The television radio company Ostankino is without a channel. The television company Ostankino hasn't even a fundamental agreement with the joint stock company Ostankino to broadcast. We won't comment because the situation affects us, and now Estonia. Estonian Parliament has adopted a law about making public the names of persons who cooperated with organs of intelligence or state security, the former USSR or Nazi Germany, everything together. Briefly, the essence of this law is such: all former collaborators or employees of the intelligence organs of the former Soviet Union or Nazi Germany during the course of 1 year must report about their activities to the police or the security services. Those who don't wish to repent will face so-called public shame. Their names will be published in the government press. informing these individuals 1 month in advance of that. People who disagree with the opinion of the police or security services can contest it in court. Deputies of the Parliament have included another point in the law, that voluntary admission of guilt will save everyone except for the President, the deputies of the State Assembly, and members of the government. If information is uncovered about them, it must be made public. Espionage fervor in France as well. From France, we received a report that the French counterintelligence has accused several American citizens of espionage, details in the report of our correspondent. That which usually was not advertised in the often not simple American-French relations this time was made public in Paris. That is the demand of the French government for the immediate departure from the country of 5 American citizens, 4 of whom are employees of the American Embassy in Paris. The French counterintelligence service, the DST, gathered a dossier with evidence that as agents of the American CIA, they were actively involved here in espionage activity, gathering information about the latest French technologies, information of an economic, military, and political nature. Their attempts to recruit high-placed French officials at a high remuneration and specialists as well backfired against them. The French reported to the authorities, continuing on the DST's request, the game with the CIA. It ended on an unprecedented high diplomatic note, unusual for the practice of the relations between the 2 countries in such a situation, which, as the Prime Minister Balladur of France admitted, is regularly repeated here and there. Why this time did Paris decide to create a stir, twice calling the American ambassador, Madame Garriman, to the Ministry of Internal Affairs of France and to face the Prime Minister? This was a double play. From one barrel, a warning shot to the Americans, who periodically stage anti-French espionage fervor campaigns in their country, and on the other hand, the main bullet was aimed in a completely different direction for the internal consumption, so as to distract the attention in the country away from the matter of the illegal wiretapping. However, it's unlikely that the exposed American spies will play the role of a lightning rod for the government in this case. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines declared the closure of its territorial waters for ships with Japanese nuclear waste, which today are departing from the French port Cherbourg. The highly active processed waste from Japanese nuclear power plants into plutonium done at plants in France should return home for long-term storage, because they would require specialized processing so as to not become radioactive substances mixed with glass, which doesn't exclude the possibility of its further processing. When a few days ago, near the White House, puffs of smoke appeared, many thought a diversion or an assassination attempt at the president. It turned out to be a fire had flared up in a bus which takes tourists around the city. No one injured because of the fire crews which arrived. When fire burst out in the apartment of a building not far from the core point of Ostankino, they also arrived in minutes. They know their business. No one can compete with them. Here, incidentally, as in other countries, firefighters are admired. In America, the firefighters often have to deal not just with fire. This equipment is compulsory for the firefighters' vehicles, explains Captain Vosper, and demonstrates not a first aid kit but an entire pharmacy. 2 days ago they delivered a baby, and every fireman must have this equipment. In Los Angeles, in the state of California, now they use military technology as well. Just imagine, there's a car accident and you can't get out of the car. The firefighters will open up the car. This is the way they do it, with the help of a micro-explosion. As cartridges, they've adapted those which are used today in separating the steps of ballistic missiles. In order to take apart a car, now we only need 2 minutes. They emphasize to us in explaining that for passengers it's safe. One may be amazed at their inventiveness, and one may understand why these people are treated in America with particular respect. One may save time in any case so as not to have to deal with the police or ambulance crews, but with a fire team, a team which can do everything. 2 people died and 18 people were seriously injured during an earthquake which occurred in Taiwan. The tragedy occurred on a mountain road when 2 enormous clumps of rock fell onto a tourist bus. The weight of the fallen rock was so great that in order to free the bus and clear the road, currently it seems impossible. Today a new term appeared: magazines facing death. the most famous large-format magazines of Russia, with the adoption of the last version of the budget for 1995, are left without financing. The Committee on Publication Matters of the Russian Federation very negatively assesses the possible cut in government subsidies for periodical publications. The chairman of the State Publishing Committee, Sergei Gitsunov, cited the following figures. The overall amount of subsidies for newspapers and magazines, according to the proposal of the Duma Committee on Information Policies, will be decreased from 140 billion rubles to 82. They will finance only special publications for the blind and the Rossiyskaya newspaper. Sergei Gitsunov emphasized that most of this money will go to the Rossiyskaya newspaper. A more catastrophic situation will face the literary and art magazines, which, because of their specifics, have no opportunity for commercial activity. The existing now for 2 decades, the pride of Russian culture can suddenly disappear. This is deeply amoral that a certain publication should exist through all taxpayers, among whom there are many subscribers of completely other magazines, newspapers, apart from those we've discussed here. How is it that we have a division and state to ourselves? And do we still have hope that we will remain within the circle of cultured and civilized mankind? This is our culture, after all. And yet, editors of the large format magazines and their colleagues from newspapers see the future with pessimism and feel that they will have only 2 recourses: to either close down or to raise their prices. That's all my information. I thank you for your attention, and in a moment you will learn the sports news. All the best. Good evening. 7 matches were played today in the International Hockey League tournament in the Western Zone. Unfortunately, we don't have all the results yet, and those matches which have already finished are on our chart. Noteworthy are games with the participation of teams fighting for the last 8th spot in the playoff series. Spartak today lost to the Torpedoes from Yaroslavl. It didn't manage to approach the rivals. SKA also lost to the Moscow Dynamos, and it couldn't get ahead of the Spartak team. But the Chemist at home beat the CSKA 2-1 and broadened the gap. The women's basketball team of the Army, again in Moscow, beat the Turkish Galatasaray 75-59 and are among the 4 best teams in Europe. The finale of the 4 will be held in Italy the end of March. The men's Army team yesterday in Ljubljana beat the local Olympia for the preliminary tournament in Europe. They're in 3rd place because the Army's rivals Cavallini lost to Pauko in Greece. At the tennis tournament in Stuttgart, Yevgeny Kafelnikov entered the quarterfinals, beating the American David Wheaton. At this hour, the group of the quarterfinalists has been joined by Larsen, Stich, and Simmering from Holland. Yesterday, the match of the first round was won by Alexander Volkov in singles with the Spaniard Sergio Bruguera. He defeated him in the first set. The second, Bruguera couldn't continue because of his injury. Children are drawing the Olympics. Today, the competition ended for Russian children for the best drawing for the Olympic Games of 1996 to be held in Atlanta. The works of the winners were sent to Lausanne. The best picture will be used eventually for a commemorative Olympic postage stamp. Yesterday, several friendly matches of the national teams were held. You see a fragment of the game Spain-Germany, which ended with a 0 tie. The Portuguese team beat the Dutch team 1-0, and the Brazilians at home defeated the Slovakian team 5-0.
Germany's best chance came from a set piece late in the game.
Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. The weather of the Kola Peninsula, the Arkhangelsk District, the Republic of Komi, and the Nenetsk Autonomous District will be influenced by a cyclone with a center over the Sea of Norway. Have a look. The atmospheric front, which is connected with the cyclone and also a broad zone of precipitation, is shifting to the northeast. Therefore, meteorologists promise cloudy weather with wet snow and night temperatures of from -2 to 7 during the day, from 0 to -5. In Karelia, the northwestern area, the Baltic countries, in the zone of an atmospheric front, the weather is unfavorable and windy with rain and snow at times. Temperatures during the day and night from +2 to 5. In Belarus, the central Chernozem area, it's clear without precipitation. Temperatures from -1 to -4 during the day. Under the influence of atmospheric fronts from the west, cloudiness will increase and wet snow will fall. Temperature of +1 to 5. In Ukraine and Moldova, in the zone of atmospheric fronts, it will be cloudy with some spots with rain at night around 0, during the day +2 to 7. In Moldova, +13. On the central and lower Volga, in a zone of high pressure, there will be no precipitation expected. At night, fog, 0, -5. During the day, the air will be as warm as +5 degrees. In the Rostov district, in the Krasnodar, Stavropol, Rim areas, in the Chechen Republic, in Ingushetia and Dagestan, tomorrow, variably cloudy skies. In the morning and evening, patches of isolated fog. By evening, rains possible. At night, around 0. During the day, +5 to 10. On the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar Rim area, it's seasonably spring warm weather, +13 to 15. An anticyclone from the Black Sea will shift beyond the Caucasus. Tomorrow there it will be mostly clear. At night, +3 to 8. During the day, +10 to 15 degrees. In St. Petersburg, tomorrow it will be cloudy with some patches of snow and rain. At night, around 0 degrees. During the day, +1 to 3. In Moscow, partly cloudy skies. At night, clear, no precipitation, 0, -2. During the day, some light rain, +2 to 4. This was the forecast of the weather for tomorrow. We congratulate all of you on the celebration of our army, and we wish well-being and peace on earth. Goodbye.